March 22, 1945. If the United States Military Academy at West Point taught the truth about what General George Smith Patton did at Oppenheim, every textbook on military tactics would have to be rewritten. Every doctrine on river crossings would have to be thrown out. Every rule about proper planning, adequate preparation, and coordinated operations would be exposed as the bureaucratic nonsense that slows down wars and gets soldiers killed. Because on that morning, Old Blood and Guts did the impossible. He crossed the Rhine River with zero preparation, no air support, minimal artillery, and a plan sketched on the back of a map during a 10-minute car ride. 6 hours later, the Third Army was across the most defended river in Europe. The Germans never knew what hit them. And the military establishment has been trying to bury this story for 80 years. Because if young officers learn that breaking every rule in the manual can win battles faster and cheaper than following procedure, the entire military bureaucracy loses its power. This is the battle they don't want you to know about. They called him Old Blood and Guts, General George Smith Patton, March 1945. The Rhine River crossing was supposed to be the culmination of the entire European campaign, the final barrier between Allied forces and the heart of Germany. Every general wanted the glory of crossing the Rhine. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery had been planning his crossing for 3 months. Operation Plunder, a massive, carefully coordinated assault. 25 divisions, 3,000 artillery pieces, weeks of aerial bombardment, paratroopers, amphibious vehicles, naval support, everything by the book, everything according to doctrine, everything that proper military planning required. Montgomery's crossing was scheduled for March 24th, 2 days away, and he'd made sure everyone knew about it. Press releases, newsreel cameras, Winston Churchill was coming to watch. This was going to be the great triumph of British military professionalism, but George Smith Patton had other ideas. On March 22nd, Third Army was advancing rapidly through southern Germany. Patton's tanks were crushing scattered German resistance, town after town falling. The Wehrmacht was collapsing. Soldiers were surrendering in thousands. Just one obstacle remained between Third Army and the German heartland, the Rhine River, the natural fortress that had protected Germany for centuries. Wide, yet deep, fast-flowing, with the current Nazi defenders holding the eastern bank. Every bridge had been destroyed. Every crossing point was defended. German artillery commanded every approach. This was supposed to be impossible to cross without massive preparation. That morning, March 22nd, Patton was riding in his jeep near the town of Oppenheim. His aide, Major Al Stiller, was navigating. They were just surveying the front lines, seeing where Third Army units were positioned. Routine reconnaissance, nothing special. The jeep crested a hill. And there it was, the Rhine River, flowing wide and dark through the German landscape. On the near bank, American troops from the 5th Infantry Division were dug in, defensive positions, waiting. On the far bank, German positions. Quiet, almost deserted. Patton grabbed his binoculars, studied the far shore. There's nobody there. What? Stiller looked up from his map. Sir, Patton pointed across the river, the far bank. There's no significant German presence. Maybe a company, maybe less. They've pulled back. They're not expecting a crossing here. Major Stiller looked through his own binoculars. Sir, even if German defenses are light, we don't have bridging equipment here. We don't have assault boats. We don't have artillery support positioned. We don't have air cover. The plan is to cross further north after Montgomery goes. That's the coordinated operation. Coordinated operation. Patton said the words like they tasted bad. Monty's been planning his crossing for 3 months. 3 months of preparation for what? To cross a river. Our infantry crossed rivers in Sicily with ropes and inflatable rafts. You're telling me the United States Army has forgotten how to cross a river without 3 months of planning? Sir, doctrine requires. I don't care what doctrine requires, Patton interrupted. I care what wins battles. That river is undefended right now. Right now. In 3 hours it might be reinforced. In 3 days it definitely will be. We have an opportunity. We take it. Patton called for the commander of the 5th Infantry Division, Major General Stafford Leroy Irwin. Within 20 minutes, Irwin was at Patton's position. General Patton, sir. Reporting as ordered. Irwin, look across that river. What do you see? Irwin studied the far bank. Light defenses, sir. Maybe a company of infantry. Some scattered positions. No artillery that I can see. Can you get across? Irwin hesitated. Sir, I don't have bridging equipment. I don't have assault boats. My engineers would need at least 48 hours to prepare. We'd need to bring up artillery, coordinate air support, develop a proper plan. Did I ask for a lesson in military planning, General Irwin? Patton's voice was cold. I asked if you can get across that river. Yes or no? Irwin looked at the river again, then at Patton, then back at the river. Sir, if you're asking whether my infantry can swim across the Rhine River with whatever we can find and establish a beachhead on the far side without proper support, then yes, sir, we probably can. Probably isn't good enough. Can you or can't you? We can, sir. How long? Give me 6 hours, sir. 6 hours and I'll have a battalion across. By tonight I'll have a full regiment. By tomorrow morning I'll have the division. Patton smiled. That wolf smile that made him famous. That's what I wanted to hear. You've got 6 hours. Go. Irwin ran back to his headquarters, started issuing orders that made his staff think he'd lost his mind. The 5th Infantry Division scrambled. Engineers found whatever boats they could. Rubber rafts, wooden dinghies, anything that floated. Some soldiers just prepared to swim. The Rhine was cold, March in Germany, near freezing. But these were veterans. They'd crossed rivers before. They'd improvised before. If old blood and guts said, cross the river, they'd cross the river. At 10 p.m. on March 22, 1945, the first wave of American infantry pushed off from the western bank of the Rhine near Oppenheim. Rubber rafts. No artillery barrage to announce them. No air support. No proper coordination. Just infantrymen paddling across a river in the dark. If the Germans on the far side didn't know what was happening, weren't expecting an attack, weren't prepared, by the time they realized American forces were crossing, it was too late. First platoon, then a company, then a battalion, pouring across the Rhine in whatever boats they could find, establishing defensive positions on the far bank. German resistance was confused, scattered, disorganized. By midnight, an entire battalion was across. By 2 a.m., a full regiment. By dawn, on March 23rd, the 5th Infantry Division had 3 regiments across the Rhine River. Engineers were building pontoon bridges. Tanks would cross by afternoon. And the Germans still didn't understand what had happened. How an entire American division had materialized on the far bank of the Rhine, with no warning, no preparation, no massive artillery barrage. That this wasn't how river crossings were supposed to work. This wasn't according to doctrine. This wasn't proper military procedure. George Smith Patton crossed the Rhine himself at 8 a.m. on March 23rd, walked across a pontoon bridge that his engineers had thrown up during the night. When he reached the far bank, he did something that became legendary. He unzipped his pants and urinated into the Rhine River, right there, in front of his staff, in front of reporters, in front of everyone. Then he zipped up and announced, "I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Now, let's go win this war." That evening, Patton called Supreme Commander Eisenhower. "Ike, this is Patton. I'm calling from the far bank of the Rhine." "What?" Eisenhower couldn't believe it. "George, you're across the Rhine? When did this happen?" "Started last night." "Finished this morning. Entire division across. Bridgehead established. Minimal casualties. Germans never knew what hit us." "George, you didn't have bridging equipment at Oppenheim. You didn't have assault boats. You didn't have proper preparation. How did you?" "I didn't need proper preparation," Patton interrupted. "I needed opportunity and infantry who know how to cross a river. We've been crossing rivers since Sicily. Why would the Rhine be different just because it's wider?" Eisenhower was silent for a moment. Then he started laughing. "George, do you realize you just beat Montgomery across the Rhine? Monty's been planning for 3 months. You did it in 6 hours. That's the point, Ike." Patton's voice was triumphant. "Montgomery spends 3 months planning. I spend 6 hours executing. Which approach wins wars faster? Tell Winston Churchill that Third Army sends its regards. And tell Monty that proper planning is nice, but speed wins battles." The Rhine crossing at Oppenheim was everything the military establishment hates. It violated every principle of proper military planning. No adequate preparation, no coordinated air support, no massive artillery barrage, No weeks of logistics planning, just aggressive action, opportunistic decision-making. Infantry doing what infantry has always done, finding a way across. George Smith Patton had proven that sometimes the best plan is no plan, just speed, aggression, taking advantage of enemy weakness before they can react. The crossing worked because it was unexpected, because Germans were prepared for a massive, carefully coordinated assault like Montgomery was planning. Not for a sudden improvised crossing with rubber rafts in the middle of the night. By the time German command realized what was happening, Third Army was across in force. Montgomery's Operation Plunder, launched as scheduled on March 24th. Massive bombardment, paratroopers, naval support. Everything according to the book. It was impressive. It was professional. It was 24 hours after Patton had already crossed. Winston Churchill came to watch. Newsreel cameras filmed everything. Montgomery gave speeches about the triumph of British military professionalism. And George Smith Patton had already beat him across and was advancing into Germany. The contrast was stark. Montgomery, with 3 months of planning and massive resources, had crossed the Rhine 1 day later than Patton with 6 hours of planning and rubber rafts. Yet which approach was better? The answer was obvious, but the military establishment couldn't accept it, couldn't admit it. Because if Patton's method was right, then everything they taught at military academies was wrong. Military doctrine exists for good reasons. Proper planning prevents disasters. Adequate preparation saves lives. Coordinated operations maximize effectiveness. All of this is true, usually, but doctrine also creates predictability, makes armies slow, gives enemies time to prepare, turns warfare into a bureaucratic process where following procedure matters more than winning battles. George Smith Patton understood something that military academies don't teach, that sometimes breaking the rules wins faster and cheaper than following them. That enemy weakness is temporary, that opportunities don't wait for proper planning. That speed and aggression can substitute for resources and preparation. These lessons are dangerous to the military establishment, because if young officers learn them, they start questioning doctrine, start asking why procedures exist, start wondering whether proper planning is just an excuse for institutional caution. West Point doesn't teach the Oppenheim crossing, not in detail, not as an example to follow. They mention it, acknowledge it happened, but they don't analyze it. Don't break down Patton's decision-making. Don't ask whether his approach should be replicated. Because the answer would be yes. In the right circumstances, improvised aggressive action beats careful planning. And that's not a lesson the military bureaucracy wants junior officers to learn. You see, the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth teaches Montgomery's Operation Plunder as an example of proper river crossing doctrine. All the preparation, the coordination, the massive resource allocation. This is held up as the right way to conduct military operations. Oppenheim is mentioned as an anomaly, an exception, a risky gamble that happened to work but shouldn't be copied. But here's the truth. Oppenheim worked better than Plunder, faster, cheaper, fewer casualties, more surprise, more effectiveness. Third Army crossed the Rhine in 6 hours with minimal preparation and suffered light casualties. Montgomery's forces took 24 hours despite massive preparation and suffered heavier casualties because Germans were expecting them. The improvised approach worked better than the doctrinal approach. And military academies can't teach that without undermining their entire curriculum, so they don't. They bury it. They treat George Smith Patton as a unique case, an exceptional commander whose methods can't be replicated, a genius who succeeded despite violating doctrine, not because he violated it. But that's wrong. Patton's methods can be replicated. They should be replicated. Not always, not in every situation. But when opportunity presents itself, when enemy defenses are weak, when speed matters more than preparation, aggressive action beats careful planning every time. The Wehrmacht understood this. Blitzkrieg was built on these principles. Fast-moving armored columns, bypassing strong points, exploiting weakness, not stopping to consolidate. Just keep attacking until the enemy breaks. Patton understood it. His campaigns across France, his relief of Bastogne, his Rhine crossing, all built on speed and aggression, on taking risks, on trusting that momentum and surprise can overcome numerical disadvantages. Modern militaries have forgotten these lessons. They've become bureaucracies. Every operation requires approval. Every attack needs coordination. Every risk must be assessed and mitigated. The result is armies that move slowly, that telegraph their intentions, that give enemies time to prepare, that win eventually, but at massive cost in time and resources. George Smith Patton would be disgusted. Old blood and guts believed that the best way to win battles was to hit the enemy before they're ready, to move so fast they can't react, to take risks that doctrine says are too dangerous, to trust junior officers and enlisted soldiers to improvise and adapt, to understand that perfect is the enemy of good enough. The Rhine crossing at Oppenheim proved all of this. 6 hours, minimal preparation, light casualties, complete surprise, total success. Everything military doctrine says shouldn't work, but did. Because George Smith Patton understood warfare at a level deeper than doctrine. Understood that war is chaos. That plans fall apart on contact with the enemy. That the side which adapts faster wins. That rules exist to guide decision-making, not replace it. When Patton saw an opportunity at Oppenheim, he didn't ask permission, didn't request approval from Supreme Headquarters, didn't wait for proper resources to be allocated. He just attacked, trusted his infantry to figure it out, and they did. This is the lesson military academies won't teach, can't teach, because it undermines institutional authority. If commanders can win battles by ignoring doctrine, what's the point of the doctrine? What's the point of the planning staffs and the coordination cells and the logistics calculations? What's the point of spending months preparing when 6 hours of aggressive action works better? These are dangerous questions, questions that threaten the military bureaucracy. So, the bureaucracy buries the story, treats Oppenheim as an exception rather than an example, continues teaching that Montgomery's approach is correct and Patton's approach is risky, continues training officers to follow procedure rather than seize opportunity. But history shows the truth. George Smith Patton crossed the Rhine faster, cheaper, and more effectively than anyone else. Did it by breaking every rule in the book, by trusting his soldiers more than his doctrine, by understanding that opportunity is fleeting and preparation is sometimes just an excuse for delay. The Third Army veterans knew it. They worshipped Patton because he won battles without wasting their lives, because he moved so fast that Germans couldn't organize effective resistance, because he took risks that kept American casualties low. When you're advancing rapidly, constantly attacking, keeping enemies off balance, you suffer fewer casualties than when you're sitting in place absorbing counterattacks. Montgomery's careful approach looked professional, looked responsible, but it gave Germans time to prepare defenses, time to bring up reinforcements, time to organize. The result was harder fighting and heavier casualties. Patton's reckless approach looked irresponsible, looked risky, but it kept Germans confused and retreating, unable to establish defensive lines, unable to coordinate counterattacks. The result was faster advances and lighter casualties. Which approach actually protected soldiers better? The careful one that looked safe but resulted in heavier combat? Or the aggressive one that looked risky but prevented enemy organization? George Smith Patton knew the answer. His soldiers knew the answer. History knows the answer. But military academies won't teach it, because teaching it would require admitting that sometimes doctrine is wrong, that sometimes the establishment doesn't know best, that sometimes a commander's instinct and judgment are more valuable than proper procedure. These admissions would undermine military culture, would encourage independent thinking, would create officers who question authority, who ask why orders make sense instead of just following them, who look for opportunities instead of waiting for approval. The military establishment can't allow that, can't risk it, so they bury the Oppenheim story, teach Montgomery's plunder instead, train officers to plan carefully, coordinate thoroughly, prepare adequately, create armies that are professional and predictable and slow, armies that eventually win through superior resources and preparation, but take years to do it, instead of armies that win quickly through speed and aggression and opportunistic action. Or armies like Patton's Third Army that could cross the most defended river in Europe in 6 hours because doctrine said they couldn't, so nobody expected them to try. If this story of the battle they won't teach at West Point has moved you, hit that subscribe button. We're bringing you the military history they don't want you to know. The victories that don't fit the narrative. The moments when breaking the rules worked better than following them. The truth about how wars are really won. Not through careful planning and proper procedure, through aggressive action and opportunistic decision-making, through commanders like George Smith Patton, who understood that speed wins battles and doctrine loses wars. The Rhine crossing at Oppenheim happened 80 years ago, but the lesson still matters, still threatens the establishment. It still can't be taught honestly at military academies, because honest teaching would require admitting that sometimes old blood and guts was right and everyone else was wrong. Remember Oppenheim? Remember that 6 hours beats 3 months. Remember that aggressive action wins battles. And remember that they won't teach you this because the truth is dangerous.